Welcome, week 3. We're going to go over the functional exercises on this week. So Tara's been gracious enough to join us today to demonstrate some of the exercises. So now we're going to go over two examples of functional flexibility, the hamstrings and the hip flexors. So Tara, if you put your left foot up. Very good. So what we do in functional flexibility, we want to take up the slack of the major range of motion of the muscle. So in this case, the hamstring is a sagittal plane muscle, primarily. You know, it's a three-dimensional muscle. So what you're going to do is maintain good posture, good curve, and she's going to flex at the hip to elicit a hamstring stretch. You got it? Yes. Yeah, all right. So now we have this nice stretch. We're not compensating through the spine at all. She's nice and tall. And now we're going to perform our drivers. So now we're going to go through a transverse plane driver with the foot. So a foot driver in the transverse plane. She's going to go external, internal. So as she goes external, more medial hamstring. As she goes internal, more lateral hamstring. Continue to go. We'll cover some of the muscles. So as she goes outside, lateral rotation, the medial hamstring is attached to the tibia on the medial side of the knee. As she goes internal rotation, the lateral hamstring comes attached to the fibular head on the outside of the knee to lengthen that muscle in the transverse plane. Now what we can do too is go arm drivers in the transverse plane. So she can reach across and then reach across here. So now what's very important on this is to have her maintain her posture so she doesn't flex the spine. Okay? And then I want to make sure that her hips, as she reaches, they actually, I got you. Good. Rotate your hips. She's a little tight. I think she exercised a little bit too much yesterday. You turn in. Good. So the hips, you've got to create reaction with your drivers. If you reach, it's just not good enough to reach with your arms. You've got to make the pelvis move because that's where the hamstrings attach and they come down to the hamstring. You go down to the knee. Good. Very good. Perfect. Thank you. Now what we're going to do is go to our iliopsoas or hip flexor stretch with the whole group of hip flexors. So Tara, we'll have you take your right leg out. We'll stretch that left side out pretty good here. We'll give you a chance to stretch out on that afterwards too. Alright, so now, same thing. Good posture, good curves, okay? And now she's going to go into the sagittal plane, which is the hip flexor's more dominant range of motion. She's going to take up that slack. Now we're going to integrate our drivers. There's a ton of possibilities with drivers. Like I mentioned before, we can use our hips, arms, legs, and what have you. I'm going to use a constant driver. I'm going to have Tara turn her leg inward, so it's internal rotation. The external, for example, the iliopsoas is an external rotator. So, hi Jen. So it internally rotates, or externally rotates the leg, so we're going to internally rotate her foot. So we have a constant tweak of the hip flexor. So now we're going to utilize arms. So as she comes in, she's going to push through overhead reach with both arms. There you go, and then come back up, and then come back in. So again, she's driving from an arm driver, and it's creating reaction through her pelvis to get hip extension. Another thing I like to do is, Tara, I want you to squeeze your glute back here. There you go, and then come up. And then as you activate, squeeze the glute again. That will add more of a stretch in the hip flexor group, protect your hip joint also. So we're going to work with the gluteal muscle, which is the antagonist of the hip flexor group, so we're training that. Now we can go through transverse plane driver of the arms. As she comes forward with the hips, we drive rotation. There you go. Again, creating a reaction through the pelvis. There you go. Good. Very good. Now this becomes more of a global function. So we get thoracic spine rotation, pelvic movement, and we're lengthening those hip flexors, squeezing the glutes for the activation. Very good. So there's a couple examples of functional flexibility to muscles using our drivers.